Welcome back to a new episode of Podcast on the Brink. It's Monday afternoon, August 11th. Josh Pos is back on Podcast on the Brink for the second time in, the last 4 or 5 days. He's down in Puerto Rico tracking the Hoosiers, who finished their exhibition tour 3-0 after two big-time come-from-behind wins, which we're going to talk to Josh about. If you enjoy the show, please leave us a rating and a review over on Apple Podcasts. Leave us a 5-star rating over on Spotify. For those of you tuning in via YouTube, please like and subscribe. That really helps us increase our reach of the show. So we'd really appreciate you doing that. So I noticed several people did that on the last podcast we had with Josh. So if you could do that again, we would truly appreciate it. Josh, you just got back from the arena. It was another come from behind win for Indiana basketball. What is it about this team maybe that you saw in these last two games that they dig a big hole and then are able to come out of it? It seemed like obviously the other day was a lot more clear cut that they were going to win. This game, it was touch and go there in the fourth quarter. It really didn't seem like they were going to be able to complete the comeback, but they were able to ultimately prevail. I'm just curious, seeing you watching this team up close now for 3 games, but more particularly in these last 2 games, what did you see that maybe led to the big deficits and then allow them to come back?
Yeah, it was a slow start. It really starts with a 3-point shot. They can't get that first shot to fall. At least in those first 2 games, they started, I think, 0 of 5 or 0 of 6 today. And once they got down, there was just a grit about this team. There was 9 substitutions in the first 4 or 5 minutes that Darren DeVries made trying to plug and play. He was trying. Indiana got back to 6. It ballooned out to 20 by halftime. It was 50-30. But at neither of these games, at no point was anybody on the bench disengaged. It's a summer trip. Everybody could have been disengaged. They could have been talking about their plans for the next day, or I can't wait to go home and be back in Bloomington. But there was never a point where the intensity wavered. They were down 16 at one point today in the second half, and the entire bench was standing again, doing a defense chant, leading the crowd in a defense chant. And then as soon as blood's in the water, this team pounces. This team is the team full of sharks. And Darren DeVries actually said after the game that there were some guys afraid to jump in when they were snorkeling because of sharks. Well, there are a bunch of sharks right now in those last 2 games. It was really fun to watch them feed off the crowd's energy while also creating their own energy with each other on the bench.
You mentioned that energy. So, I watched your highlights from all 3 games. I noticed the first game, it was pretty subdued for the whole game, but obviously it was a non-competitive game against a team that Indiana really could have just shown up and probably played its 5 worst players and won handily. But the last 2 games, a much different story. But even though the attendance there hasn't necessarily been large, I think maybe at the most a couple hundred people for the last couple of games, it did seem like Indiana fans really kind of brought it these last 2 games and got into it. Was that kind of how it was, and how did maybe Indiana feed off that energy, if at all?
There was maybe 100 Indiana fans those 3 games, each game 100 fans. They fed off the defense chants with each other, the crowd and the players. And I have it in the video and the highlights that when the Mega Super Bet player dribbled the ball off his own foot and out of bounds, Sam Alexis was right in front of the varsity club members or the people that made the trip, and he was just ecstatic. And he was feeding off their energy. They were feeding off his energy, and they made I think it was a 4,000 seat arena feel a little bit louder despite the lack of size and numbers. And it's a true testament to how this team will play inside of Assembly Hall, while also in a road environment, how they can create their own energy. So a lot of good things come from just the energy portion, less than the score.
In terms of just today's game specifically, because it's a little bit more intriguing to me from the standpoint of they really had to get some stops down the stretch. It was a close game. The other game on Saturday, obviously it's impressive what they were able to do. I think the run that I saw you report or mention at one time was 70-19. So to turn around a game like that is obviously impressive. But this game was different in that, as I mentioned, they had to really buckle down late and get stops. And it seemed like early in the game they weren't able to get any stops. Did anything change defensively that you saw in the second half, just in terms of how they were approaching each possession? Was there more of an urgency? I know we were talking before I hit record that you mentioned in terms of how they came out today, maybe not as locked in from the get go, but it did seem like they were able to turn up the intensity defensively down the stretch. What did you see from them? And this is again, it's hard to really say what competition level Mega Superbet is, but I will add that they have some players who are Division One caliber. They have a guy who was drafted in the second round of the NBA draft by the Milwaukee Bucks, who's going to stay overseas for this year. But at some point, I would assume that since the Bucks drafted him, they want him to come over and be a part of their roster. So this isn't a team that they played that was a complete rollover, and it's impressive to me that they were able to kind of, and we're caveating all this with this is an exhibition game in August. We're not making predictions on what's going to actually happen when the games are played, but these are the three games that we've had a chance to, well, you've had a chance to see, we've had a chance to read about and watch some highlights. But to me, it was impressive how they were able to maybe dig down and get those stops and able to overcome the deficit and win down the stretch.
Yeah, they just wore Mega Superbet down in the second half, really, of both games. It started late in the first half on Saturday night, but the defensive intensity ratcheted up. And all of a sudden, there was a flip that got switched. And Tatum Connerway really led Indiana in that first half. He's the reason that this was an Indiana win. He didn't play very much in that second half, but he had 18 first half points, Alex. And I think he had 5 steals today. It might have been, it was actually only listed as 3. But there were pass deflections. There was everything, and he was drawing fouls. He drew 9 fouls today. It was him in the first half, and then Lamar Wilkerson finally got it going in the second half, and it gave Indiana confidence. Their defense got better. Their intensity was even higher than what it was in the first half, and they just decided to buckle down and get some stops. And the switching, we can talk about it later, but there were some bigger guys on Mega Superbet, obviously, than UCB on Wednesday. They had to go to the 2 big lineup a little bit, but a lot of switching on the screen. So a lot of mismatches, doubling down. But Tatum Connerway, Connor Enright, Josiah Miles, who's not as small as the other 2, they played just as big as someone who was 6'5", 6'6". It was incredible to see them push and fight. Enright fouled out in both games. Some of those calls were FIBA officials, I should say. But everybody did their job on the defensive end, and everything we saw a couple weeks ago in practice where they were preaching the gap, stay in the gap, stay in the gap. They were doing that. They were staying in their gaps. The coaching staff was standing. I think there's like 9 coaches at the front of the bench who were all standing, got a bench warning at one point. But it was that defensive intensity of staying in the gap, doubling down, switching screens, and playing a strong brand of basketball to wear Mega Superbet down is what Indiana won both of those games.
So I noticed Connerway had 18 in the first half. I don't think he scored in the second half. What was he? Obviously, I don't think Indiana is going to be relying on him to score that much on a game in, game out basis. Was that just a result of, in the first half, the fact that Wilkerson and DeVries weren't necessarily playing particularly well, and he was just kind of taking the opportunities that were given? But and then on the flip side of that, what maybe were Wilkerson and DeVries not doing as well in the first half, but did better in the second half to kind of allow them to find their footing offensively?
Well, first off, for Connerway, he kind of just took it upon himself to take the ball to the basket and draw fouls. He wasn't worried about shooting 3-point shots. He went 1 of 2 in that first half. And he just took it upon himself to, okay, if no one else is going to step up, I will. On the flip side, with Wilkerson and DeVries, they were struggling from 3. Both of them were. And it happened with Tucker DeVries. His first basket didn't come until midway through the third quarter. He took the ball, he pump faked, a couple dribbles to the basket, a 2-hand dunk, and that's what led him to 13 points in that second half. Lamar Wilkerson, no points in that first half, also took the ball to the rim. They both, I think, combined maybe 4 and 1s. Indiana maybe had 6 in the second half alone. But those two and Sam Alexis combined for 40 points, 40 of Indiana's 51 points in the second half, all by getting downhill and getting to the rim. The three-point shot wasn't really falling for Indiana. 7 for 25, not terrible. They had some open looks in transition that just rimmed out, but they realized that that shot was not falling, took it to the basket, and 32 paint points is what the difference was in the game.
Sam Alexis is someone that was obviously impressive this trip in terms of the overall numbers. Played really well again today. What did you see out of him over these 3 games? Was there anything you saw? I know you saw the practice too a couple weeks ago. Was there anything you saw from his game down there that maybe you weren't expecting? And what kind of role could Indiana fans potentially expect him to play this coming season?
I think Sam Alexis is going to be the guy that goes back to the basket more so than Reed Bailey. He was playing a really physical brand of basketball against one of Superbet's big guys, and he was winning these battles. He got swatted a couple times, but at the same time, he had a couple reverse pivots that were just beautiful footwork. His footwork has gotten better even since that first practice. He was struggling a little bit. He's not going to be one to take the three. As for Reed Bailey, he might be that more stretch 5, didn't shoot one today, nor Saturday. But he's one of those guys that can take the ball up the floor. But Sam Alexis, he really surprised me in these 3 games, more specifically today and Saturday, with just his physicality and his ability to finish through contact.
Did he spend much time on the floor? I don't want to put you on the spot because I don't know. Obviously, not tracking lineups, but do you recall if he spent much time on the floor with Bailey at all? Is that something you think could be viable this season?
Against really big lineups like Superbet, and they did play together periodically. It wasn't long stretches. It was when Indiana really needed a couple big guys on the floor just to stop the length. At times on the switches, there was a 6'11" guy being guarded by a 6-foot Connor Enright. So they needed to figure out, how can we guard their 2 bigs? We got to get 2 bigs on the floor. And the offense still worked pretty well. The ball screen, a pick and roll, I recall, I think it's in the highlights. It was a pick and roll with Enright and Bailey that went really well. And there's 2 bigs on the floor because there's a guy on the weak side corner. It's either Bailey or Sam Alexis that really spreads the floor because they are at times decent 3-point shooters. So the 2 big lineup works a lot better than it did last year, just with the versatility of both of the bigs.
Connor Enright, you mentioned the foul issues. Doesn't seem like he was really maybe ever able to get into the flow of the game. Was that maybe these FIBA refs picking on him a little bit? I know there was a game where he had either a technical or an intentional foul. But what were your observations of him just watching him? We know what he's going to bring just in terms of energy, a guy that can get under people's skin. Was he doing any of that down there?
Yeah, we found out a couple of weeks ago that he was a Wisconsin basketball fan. And my first comparison, I wrote about it, is Brad Davidson. He's going to be a guy that Indiana fans love. He's going to be a guy that Big Ten fans hate just because of the way he plays basketball. He got in a guy's head on Saturday night, and the guy forearmed him in the back of the head. And he gets up, and it's not a very packed gym, so you can hear most things. And he gets in the guy's face and is screaming, yeah, gets a technical. And he's one of those guys that will just frustrate a guard. And he might have 3-4 fouls a game. And some of the stuff he got away with, a lot of it he did not get away with. There was a couple times when he was beat down low against a 6'11" guy where he'd wrap around. And that's where he would get his foul called. And he was just one of those guys. Him and Tatum Conaway were the ones on Saturday. Conaway kind of kept it, his talking on the floor with his 18 points in the first half. They are guys that will nonstop talk to an opponent just to get in their head and then give them no room as they dribble the basketball. He might not fill up the stat sheet, but he had 6 rebounds in 25 or 22 minutes, nearly 23 minutes of game action today. So he's going to fly in for a rebound and try to push the floor as Indiana did all day.
What was your sense of just how competitive these games were just from the side of both teams wanting to win? Obviously, Indiana had to really fight to get back in both of these games. But it also, I may be mistaken here, but these are probably games that Superbet wanted to have at least one of to kind of feel good about their trip to play these games. Was the intensity level pretty high? Was it contested like a regular game, or was it more like an exhibition? How would you characterize it?
If you started streaming that game, and you didn't know what the date was, you'd probably think it was November or December. It was chippy. You'd have thought these teams had bad blood from about.
Why do you think that was?
I really think it started with Tate and Connerway and Connor Enright in that first game. From the jump, they were frustrating the Serbian players to the point where they would just get that shoulder or forearm to the back of the chest, or to the chest, or to the back of the head. And it was to the point where Indiana frustrated these guys so much in that second half on Saturday that as they were going to the bench for a timeout, Superbet was trying to talk something to Enright, and he got right up in the guy's face. He came off the bench, by the way. He was not on the floor, and just started yapping in the guy's face. A coach had to bring him back, and it was just a hilarious moment because Indiana had all their guys near half court because they were just on this run. A timeout was happening, and these Serbian guys had no idea what to do. Usually they're the aggressors, what it appeared to be. They were on their heels. There's blood in the water, and there was just nonstop chatter between the two teams. Not so much early in the first half of today's game, but towards halftime, there were some pretty hard fouls. And then the second half, as the game kind of got closer and farther and then closer again, and late in the game, it was just an intensity level that you see in a regular season game.
How was the officiating, just in terms of what they were letting go and what they were actually calling? I saw a couple clips on there. It kind of seemed like there was some things that maybe were let go and not called that would have been called in a Big Ten game. But I'm just curious from your perspective what you saw in terms of how the games were called and the amount of physicality they allowed.
Flip the coin. You had no idea. I mean, I had it right there. I've had a lot of change. Paid a lot.
That was slick. That was slick, man.
Yeah, thank you. I don't know what a foul is in FIBA officiating. I don't know what goaltending is. I'm not sure if a guy like Courtney Green would be able to handle the officials in this particular setting. Or Darren DeVries got upset many times. I didn't know if he had the demeanor to get upset in an exhibition game, and that was another thing that you'd have thought that there was tournament implications on the line, because the entire coaching staff was irate with the officials. The bench, the players on the floor, it was an intense atmosphere that the officiating didn't really know how to keep up with. I don't know what they're used to here in Puerto Rico, but it was not what those last two games were in terms of physicality. So there was a time that there was a forearm to the back, nothing. A push on a rebound didn't get called. I think today Reed Bailey, this is when Indiana got the bench warning. Reed Bailey got shoved, and then the loose ball, and all of a sudden the whistle blew. So Indiana thought they got the ball, but there was a foul on Reed Bailey. You'd have thought that something bad happened in the arena based on how Darren DeVries reacted. But it just shows, it goes to show how intense the team was despite a Monday morning game. But I'm glad I don't have to see that again in terms of officiating.
I mean, how valuable do you? I feel like sometimes we can make too much out of this kind of stuff. Obviously, when the actual games in November begin, we're gonna forget about all this stuff quickly once they start playing Marquette and Kentucky and Louisville and whoever else that they're playing in the non-conference. But how valuable of an experience do you think this is going to be over the next couple months for Indiana to have this have these games under their belt? The coaching staff obviously gets some film, and they get the head start with the extra practices. I mean, is this something that can actually pay big dividends when the season starts? Does it make Indiana a better team from the get-go? And how much development can they ultimately get from these games and this opportunity to have the extra practices?
I think the extra practices is what Darren DeVries wanted, especially with an entirely new team. He felt that those, I think, 10 extra practices, I believe is what it was. He felt that those were more important than the games. I would agree with him to an extent because Saturday's game, you go on that 70-19 run, it shows that you're able to. Today's game, I think, had the most meaningful moments and in terms of going to November and December and you name Big Ten play, the months in Big Ten play. Because not only did they come back, but they won in a close game. They went up 2-0 and then didn't lead until there was 6-point-something seconds left on the clock. That just shows how this team can work together to get back into the games. Maybe you shouldn't be spotting your opponent 20-plus points in the first half. That's another thing. But it shows that you're able to come back in these games. So when they're down by 12 at the half against, let's say, Michigan or Michigan State at home, there's a chance that they know going into that locker room, hey, we've done this before. It might have been back in August, but hey, we're here. We've done it together. It's always a together thing, and that's what it sounded like after both of these games. We had battled adversity together. We did it as one. We're better as a unit, is what we heard the entire time after from Lamar Wilkerson, both games. We're better together, and they did it as one, as a group, and they won a close game. They got that last stop at the end. They found who wanted the ball at the end. It was Lamar Wilkerson. They ran him off the three-point line and a perfect feed to Sam Alexis for a dunk, or Reed Bailey, rather, for the dunk. And it just showed that they can win close games as a group.
So for Indiana fans, what should maybe be the most encouraging thing coming out of this trip in terms of what you saw on the floor?
That's a good question. I wasn't prepared for it. I think the three-point shot will come around in games. I think that when the three-point shot isn't working, don't expect them to chuck up 33 threes or 25 threes. They might still do it, but they're going to fix it and adjust on the fly. That's what should excite Indiana fans. They went down by 20 points, 23 points on Saturday, 22 points today, and adjusted. That didn't happen in the past. The adjustments made at the break and within the game as well from both coaches and players alike is something that people should really look forward to with this team. The guys respond to the coaching staff, and they're all up. They're all coaching. They're not just yelling just to yell. Darren DeVries isn't yelling just to yell. He is coaching, and that was what was valuable in these games and that Indiana fans can look forward to.
What's maybe your biggest lingering question coming out of watching these three games about this team?
My biggest concern right now is the first quarter, the first 10 minutes of games. I know there's quarters here, halves in back home. I really think that they need to figure out how to come out of the gate. They have good intentions, but they're not converting shots. You got to make that first 3-point shot. You got to go up 4-0. You got to get an early lead and see where that takes you. We saw them get down in both games by double digits almost immediately. You got to come out of the gate strong, because when you're at a Michigan State, you're at a Purdue, you're at a Nebraska at this point for this program. You're going to have to start off much better than you did in these last two games.
In terms of the front court, I know one thing just from watching that practice you and I talked about was concerns about how they're going to guard the post. I know you mentioned Mega Superbet having some size in the post. I mean, overall, how did Indiana fare just in terms of being able to guard in the paint? Is that still something that you think is going to be a challenge against certain teams?
I think with Mega Superbet, their guys weren't strong. They were big, but they weren't strong. So
okay.
I'm going to mess his name up. Bogolub Markovic, the 47th overall pick in the draft.
Okay.
He was playing, and it wasn't Reed Bailey that was guarding him. I expected that on Saturday. It was actually Tucker DeVries, and he played him straight up pretty well. But on the first dribble and the back turned, Indiana will send the double, and then their rotation was really good. They had worked on that. You could tell that Indiana knows they're going to be a smaller team. They're not going to be the tallest team on the floor, unless they're playing Bayamon Central University or whatever they were. So they worked defensively on adjusting and shifting out to the next man and getting the ball and not leaving an open man. The rotations were fantastic in both of these games. And to be honest with you, the 10 threes that Superbet made today, I'd say 4 of them were just heavily contested. 4 or 5 of them were heavily contested and just great shots. In their offense was constantly moving. It was impressive. But Indiana, that post defense, they're not going to play straight up, but they're going to play really good defense on the rotation.
Terrific insight there on everything there, Josh. Before we let you go, and I know you want to get to writing and you leave in the morning, but we talked earlier in the trip about what you've been able to do in Puerto Rico. Now you've obviously been there quite a bit longer and had a chance to experience some other things. What were maybe some of the highlights for you outside of the basketball and what you were able to do? I know you got to spend some time with a couple other members of the media and go around and do some things. I'm just kind of curious how everything went in terms of the non-basketball stuff and what you enjoyed most about the trip.
It was a blast. From when I landed on Tuesday night here in San Juan, the food was incredible. Empanadas might just be my favorite food out there at this point. Rice and beans I can go without for quite some time. The ocean, I'm the only time I've really been to the ocean with waves is when I was like 14, and that was like peak jumping waves time. Did that I think that was Saturday with Daniel Flick, or Friday with Daniel Flick of Hoosiers on SI. But we had a good time all throughout Old San Juan. I really recommend, if you go on a cruise, go through San Juan, go through Puerto Rico. This place is really cool and some good food, and I didn't lose my backpack. That's all.
Yeah. You want to tell the backpack story now that it has a happy ending? Because we dealt with that. I didn't deal with it. I think you were concerned on Saturday when your backpack turned up missing. I think you were worried that it was going to be a bigger catastrophe, but I told you to remain calm. Everything is going to work out. And lo and behold, the backpack shows back up today. What happened with the backpack?
Well, I was writing after Saturday night's game, and I was writing at the scorer's table, and I put my bag kind of near like the front of the scorer's table. And I was writing. I was just about to text. I was just about to put in the highlights for Saturday night's game. I was going to be really quick, so I apologize if they didn't come out that quickly to all those who are listening. And I was ready to get going. I closed my laptop and I go, all right, who took my backpack? Like, who's playing a joke on me? We searched, we asked. I used my Spanish. I've been fantastic with my Spanish this trip, I would like to say. Thank you for 9 years of Spanish, all of my schools. And they were like, well, there's no backpack here. And so I'd given up, and not everything was gone. I had a lot. I still had my phone, my wallet, my AirPods, my computer, the camera, and it was just some sunglasses and miscellaneous things in there. And so I get to the arena today, different arena, mind you. We're in Carolina. The other one was at Coliseo Roberto Clemente. I'm talking to Jeff Rabjohns, and he said, you should file a police report. I said, okay, that doesn't sound, it would be dumb. I've given up hope. And all of a sudden I look over, and behind Mega Superbet's bench is my backpack. Just out of the blue, grabbed it, and I don't think I let go of it the entire game. For 3 hours, I held onto it tight. It's in my possession. Everything was in there, so thank you to Mega Superbet for bringing it back unscathed. But man, it was mental warfare for about 48 hours there.
Well, I'm glad the backpack has an happy ending. Indiana goes 3-0. You have a great time off the court there. You've done terrific work. I know everyone that reads the site, that follows on social media, that's going to listen to this podcast, watch the video, is really appreciative of the work that you've done. I'm appreciative of it, because obviously we needed you to take the trip down there, and you made the most of the opportunity. Still got a couple stories probably to write before you take off in the morning, and who knows, maybe some more coverage to come in the days and weeks ahead based on what you saw down there. I'm sure there's some other things that we can come up with, but thanks again, Josh, for making the time this afternoon. I really enjoyed having you on the show, and I've really enjoyed your coverage down there in Puerto Rico.
Yeah, thank you very much for sending me down here, and thank you for everyone who followed me on Twitter, followed my stories, commented on the stories. It made an empty room one person feel full, and it felt like I was here for a bigger purpose than myself and Indiana basketball.
Well, you absolutely were. Indiana fans were kind of seeing the response to our last podcast and all the traffic that we're getting to the site, the views on YouTube. People are really excited about it, and so thanks again, Josh, for going down to Puerto Rico and for the great coverage. Thanks everybody, as always, for listening to Podcast on the Brink. If you enjoyed the show, as I said at the top, leave us a 5-star rating and a review over on Apple Podcasts. Leave us a 5-star rating on Spotify, and we'll be back soon with another episode of Podcast on the Brink.